the people themselves, and this incidental note was my observation when I talked to a great many Arabs who are living very happily in Israel and being elected to public office, and even the mayor of Acre at the time I was there was an Arab, a Muslim. These people can get along together. That struck me so forcibly. I saw the Jewish children and the Arab children going in and out of schoolrooms and sitting together and playing together and going into one of their homes to get a piece of bread after school in the afternoon. Do you think that if left alone, the people would get along?
You mentioned Acre. When I was in Israel last summer, I thought, well, now we're always hearing of this dreadful military government in Nazareth. I'd better go along and have a look at it and see this dreadful oppression of the Arabs. So I went along and I asked if I might see the General Secretary of the military government. They said certainly, and took me into a room. And there was a Muslim Arab lawyer whom I'd met 10 years before, General Secretary of the military government. So that there's no question that they can get along. There's no factual question, but that they can get along. After all, one of the propaganda things that is often said is, why didn't the Jews go to an empty country if they wanted to make a state? They did go to the emptiest section of the world that was habitable, the Middle East. There was room for them. There was more room for them there than in your deserts in Nevada or the other places proposed. It was habitable, it was known to be habitable, it had been the great grain-producing country of the ancient world. The ruins of its cities, now in absolutely desert land, show that they had once been fertile. There was room for them. Of course, there's no factual reason why they can't get on together.
Well, now, that is a very good point, because certainly that is a desolate area in every sense of the word, and wide expanses where you can travel and not even see anyone. I don't mean in the comparatively small area of Israel, but in the vast areas behind it, and, well, as the Bible says, I believe, east of the river.
Yes.
Now, I would like to bring out one other point in our last few minutes, Dr. Parks. We have, I am certain, in this country, and I share in it, so many vast misconceptions, and yet we are trying in what we think is a true American tradition to strive toward a certain balance of judgment, which we sometimes call impartiality, or we find some other synonym. I'd like to have you comment on that somewhat as you did yesterday, if you would, please.
Well, now, what I was saying yesterday in the course of the discussion was this. By all means, be impartial when you've got your facts. But the difficulty is that too often the people who appeal for impartiality would prefer you to be impartial before you know the facts. And that means being impartial very often between truth and error, between sense and nonsense, between what is possible and what is quite impracticable. And that's a very foolish form of impartiality. People in the Near East are imperfect like everybody else. And sometimes a wise and utterly friendly judgment will be against one side and entirely in favor of the other side. At other times, maybe just the other way around. At other times, truly impartiality may say to both sides, you must make concessions. You've both got right on your side, you must make concessions. So that impartiality is a very good thing when you've got people who really know and care about the facts. It's an awfully bad slogan when instead of solid scholarly knowledge of the facts, there's a wild mass of propaganda going about in all directions.
Then this matter of impartiality, as one might use it when reading a philosophy textbook and trying to decide whether, let's say, Spencer or Nietzsche had the balance of truth on his side, that type of impartiality, which you can use in a classroom or in your armchair when you're reading a textbook, is not quite the practical way that we must approach these very real situations. Am I stating...
That is exactly what I feel. You find your real impartiality when you really can get through the propaganda sometimes on both sides is a bit exaggerated, get down to the actual facts, and of course a cobbler sticks to his last. I say, in that ancient part of the world, know your historical facts. I've spent 25 years on the last 3,000 years of history. Well, 25 years is quite a short time for trying to cover 2,000 to 3,000 years of history. You may not have 25 years to give, but you still have got time to realize that the whole of the Middle East, tradition counts for all of them.
Well, now, may I ask a $64 question, as the saying is going around? How are those of us who do not have the opportunity to spend 25 years in investigation of this history to see all of the ramifications of the current events, as it were, in this little short period in which we live, how are we going to get the facts? We can't compare with a man like you. How are we going to make our judgments?
Well, of course, my short answer is that I do put the results of my 25 years into books which you can read.
That is a good answer.
The thing I would add to that is you'll nearly always get nearer the truth if you can get a group. The group mind, if there really is a humble and sincere desire to know the truth, it's very apt to come nearer it. Get people who perhaps represent, quite sincerely, different points of view, who know some part of the facts, get them talking together. You come nearer to the truth that way. And remember, the truth itself is not something static. It's something that's all the time moving and dynamic. So that if you haven't got every bit of it onto the scales today, it may tag along tomorrow.
Well, now, that was a nice touche. Get some of your books. We have a little bit of time left, and may I say that I do have one of your books, which I have read, I think, 4 times now, and I'm still profiting by every reading. But would you like to mention your books in the last moment or so?
Well, one book that will help you to get the background is A History of Palestine. From the end of the biblical period, as you might call it, down to the establishment of the Jewish state. I did try to cover in that book not merely the Jewish history, but the history of Jews, Christians, and Muslims from the 1st century A.D. right down to modern times. It'll give you background. Then I've got a book just coming out called End of an Exile, which will give you the current situation related to it.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting the second book, The Exile. Ladies and gentlemen, and Dr. Parks, I'm terribly sorry that our time is up. You have been listening to an interview with Dr. James W. Parks in Washington, D.C., British clergyman and authority on the relation of church and synagogue in the United States for a transcontinental tour, addressing academic and ministerial groups on the very things you've been hearing about today. This is Roger Bosworth, host for your transcribed University Symposium, saying I'm sorry to cut it short, but it's goodbye for now.
Goodbye.